The enemy armada drifted in the dark sea of space like a wall of iron. Hundreds of alien ships moved together in perfect lines, their engines glowing faint blue against the endless black. They were calm, confident, and sure of their strength. For many cycles they had traveled across galaxies, crushing weaker races, burning colonies, and leaving no survivors. Their commanders believed nothing could stand against them. But that calm began to break when one sensor operator noticed something strange. His screen flickered with an unknown signal. At first he thought it was a system error, a glitch in the scanning grid. He adjusted the system, tapped the console, and tried again. The signal returned stronger. It was faint but clear. Something massive was moving in the dark. The operator's hands shook as he called the attention of his superior officer. The officer frowned, checked the readings, and his expression turned pale. The signal was not from debris, not from asteroids, and not from any known alien craft. It carried a distinct pattern of energy that only old records described. It was a human warship. The officer froze for a long moment, unable to believe it. He remembered stories told in hushed whispers about humans, about the strange warriors from the far side of the stars. Long ago, humans had fought wars so terrible that entire fleets were erased in hours. They had vanished from the great conflicts, silent for centuries, but their reputation never died. Now the signal showed their return. The officer quickly sent the report up the chain of command. The bridge of the flagship received the warning. The admiral of the Armada, a tall creature with 4 glowing eyes, studied the data. His heart began to pound in his chest. He knew what this meant. Every captain in the fleet would remember the same stories, the same fears. He ordered silence on all channels and demanded confirmation. Multiple sensor arrays were aimed at the unknown signal. Each system confirmed it. A single giant ship was approaching their position, slow, steady, and unafraid. The admiral's throat tightened. His mind raced. They were not prepared for this. Their fleet was strong against common enemies, but against humans? No number of ships was enough. Meanwhile, on smaller ships across the Armada, whispers spread among crew members. They saw the signal and recognized the old signature. Panic stirred in their hearts. Some refused to believe it. Others prayed it was not true. But the readings grew clearer. The warship was coming closer. Its power was unlike anything they had seen in years. It was not just large, it was enormous, a shadow that swallowed stars behind it. The admiral tried to calm his officers. He spoke with authority, telling them to stay focused, to prepare defenses, to keep formation. But even his voice trembled. He knew what the humans represented. They were predators in the galaxy. And predators did not show themselves unless they were ready to strike. The Armada slowed its advance. Engines dimmed as ships drifted in uncertain silence. Every sensor screen in every vessel now showed the same dark shape. It grew clearer by the minute. The human warship had not powered its weapons, had not broadcast threats, had not made a single move of aggression. Yet the silence was worse than an attack. It was as if the humans were watching, measuring, deciding. Crews began to sweat in fear. One young alien soldier whispered to his partner, asking why the humans would come now, after so many years. The partner did not answer, because he too feared the truth. Maybe the humans had returned to remind the galaxy that they were still here. Maybe they had never left at all. Inside the flagship, the admiral clenched his fists. He tried to think of options. Attack. Impossible. Escape. Dishonor. He wanted to believe humans were only passing by, but deep down he knew. No human warship wandered without purpose. Every movement was planned. Every silence was a message. His crew asked for orders. He told them to hold position. He could not admit his fear. He could not admit that the Armada, proud and powerful, was nothing more than prey now. The signal grew stronger as the warship came closer. The tension grew so thick it felt like the air itself was heavy. Captains across the fleet began sending private messages to each other. Some argued they should strike first before the humans attacked. Others argued they should scatter and run while they had a chance. The admiral tried to silence them, but the panic had already spread like fire in dry grass. No one wanted to be the first to fight a human warship. No one wanted to be the last to flee. The warship finally came into visible range. On massive view screens across the fleet, crews saw it with their own eyes. It was a monster of steel and light, far larger than even their biggest dreadnought. Its hull was black as night with glowing patterns that looked like scars from old battles. It moved slowly, confidently, as if it had all the time in the universe. To the aliens, it looked less like a ship and more like a god made of metal. A deep silence filled every ship. No one spoke. No one breathed. They all waited to see what the humans would do. The warship's engines pulsed with controlled power. Its weapons remained quiet. But the sight alone was enough. Fear settled in every heart. Then the human warship sent a single transmission. It was short, a coded signal that few could understand. But the admiral recognized it instantly. His blood ran cold. The message meant only one thing. It meant, "We see you." The signal echoed through the alien flagship like a ghostly whisper. "We see you." The coded message was simple, but its weight crushed the hearts of every officer who heard it. Silence filled the command deck. The admiral's 4 glowing eyes narrowed in fear as his mind fought to stay calm. Around him his crew exchanged nervous glances, their bodies stiff with tension. They all knew what the signal meant. It was not a warning. It was not a threat. It was a declaration. The humans had seen them, measured them, and judged them. The admiral tried to speak with authority, his voice echoing across the bridge. He ordered the fleet to hold position and maintain formation. He said that humans were only one ship and they were an armada of hundreds. He said their numbers gave them strength. But his words felt hollow, and even he could not believe them. Across the fleet, panic began to grow. On smaller ships, captains struggled to keep order as crew members whispered in fear. Some remembered old stories of entire fleets destroyed in hours. Others remembered tales of human soldiers who fought until their last breath, never surrendering, never losing. These stories were not myths. They were history, and history always returned. On one vessel, a junior officer shouted that they should retreat before it was too late. His captain silenced him, but the fear in the officer's eyes spread to others. On another ship, an engineer muttered that even if they all fired together, it would not be enough. The words passed quickly, repeating from mouth to mouth, until entire crews began to doubt their own weapons. Messages flew across private channels. Captains argued with each other, their voices filled with anger and dread. Some demanded to attack first, to strike while the human ship had not fired. Others insisted they should scatter and flee, because staying meant death. The communication lines became a storm of noise, panic rising like a tidal wave. The admiral shouted commands to silence the chatter, but his orders could not stop the spreading fear. He slammed his fists against the arm of his chair, trying to show strength, but his crew could see the tension in his shoulders, the hesitation in his voice. Fear traveled faster than light. Meanwhile, the human warship remained silent. It drifted closer, its massive hull catching the faint light of distant stars. It did not hurry. It did not threaten. Its silence was louder than 1,000 weapons. Every alien officer stared at their screens, waiting for the moment the human weapons came alive. But nothing happened. The waiting itself became torture. Inside one of the smaller destroyers, a young soldier asked his commander why the humans were not attacking. The commander did not answer. He only stared at the warship with wide, unblinking eyes. Another soldier whispered that maybe the humans wanted them to attack first, that maybe this was a trap. The crew grew restless, their hands shaking as they gripped their consoles. The admiral finally called a meeting with his senior captains through a secure channel. Their faces appeared on screens before him. Their voices were sharp, their words quick. Some begged for orders to retreat. Others shouted that retreat would bring dishonor. One captain, his face pale, admitted that his crew was already breaking apart, refusing to obey commands. The admiral felt his stomach twist. He knew the truth. His armada was not ready to face humans. Numbers meant nothing. Fear had already infected every ship. The captains were no longer united. Their crews no longer believed in victory. He tried to calm them. He said they must show discipline. He said fear was the real enemy. But even as he spoke, the warship loomed larger behind him on the screen. His words could not hide that shadow. One captain leaned forward, his eyes burning with desperation. He demanded permission to fire first. He said they must show courage, that they must strike before the humans struck them. Another captain shouted back, calling him a fool, warning that the first attack would only bring instant death. The argument turned into chaos. Voices overlapped, shouting, growling, demanding, pleading. The admiral silenced the channel with a roar, but it was too late. The unity of his fleet was broken. He lowered his head, his eyes dark with dread. He had led many victories, crushed many enemies, but now he faced an enemy that fought with fear itself. His ships had not yet been touched by human weapons, but already they were collapsing. Across the fleet, crews began preparing emergency jumps without orders. Engineers whispered about escape routes. Pilots adjusted their courses ever so slightly, ready to flee the moment panic overcame discipline. The admiral saw the reports. He felt the control slipping through his hands like sand. He wanted to curse the humans, but deep down he admired their strategy. They did not need to fire. Their presence alone was enough. And then the worst began. On the edge of the formation, one alien captain could no longer hold back his fear. His eyes wide, sweat dripping from his forehead, he shouted for his gunners to prepare weapons. His crew obeyed without hesitation, desperate to do something, anything. The ship's cannons powered up, glowing bright in the darkness. Other ships saw the light and panicked further. The admiral shouted for them to hold fire, but the message came too late. A single beam of energy shot from the trembling alien ship, cutting across the void toward the silent human warship. The entire armada froze in horror. The beam struck the human vessel's shields and vanished like a drop of water into the ocean. No damage, no movement, nothing. The humans did not even bother to return fire. The silence was heavier than before. But the admiral knew. That silence would not last. He stared at the giant shadow on the screen and felt his body grow cold. The humans had been waiting for this moment. The shot that struck the human warship disappeared without effect. The beam of energy, powerful enough to rip apart a battleship, was swallowed by invisible shields. The human vessel did not move. It did not fire. It simply remained in the void, silent and unmoved, like a mountain watching a storm. Across the armada, alien crews gasped in fear. Their strongest weapons had done nothing. A heavy silence filled every ship. Even the captain who ordered the attack realized his mistake too late. His crew stared at the human warship with wide eyes, their hands trembling. They had provoked the predator, and now they waited for its response. On the flagship, the admiral's eyes locked on the enormous vessel. He had heard stories of human ships, but no story could capture the reality. The warship was colossal, a floating fortress of steel and power. Its hull was black, absorbing light like a shadow stretched across the stars. Glowing scars marked its surface, ancient wounds from battles long past, but instead of weakness they made it look stronger. It carried the weight of history, as if every line on its armor told a story of survival. Slowly, the warship turned its course. The movement was deliberate, steady, terrifying. Its bow shifted until it faced the alien armada directly. Hundreds of alien ships hovered in frozen silence, and in that moment they felt small, like insects before a giant. The admiral felt his chest tighten. He knew this was no accident. The humans were sending a message. They were showing that they had nothing to fear. Around him, his officers whispered in panic. Some begged him to give the order to flee. Others shouted that they must fire all weapons at once, that maybe together they could do some damage. The admiral silenced them with a wave of his hand. His voice was steady, but inside he trembled. He knew neither option would save them. Retreat would turn into chaos. Attack would bring destruction. His mind searched desperately for an answer, but there was none. On the alien destroyer that had fired, the captain ordered his gunners to prepare for another shot. But before he could fire, the human warship made its first move. A low hum rolled across the void, so deep it shook the sensors of every ship. From the human vessel, lights appeared along its hull. One by one they glowed, forming patterns like veins of fire. Then, with slow precision, the warship released smaller objects into space. Dozens of them detached from hidden bays, spreading out like a swarm. Alien crews panicked, shouting that they were missiles. Sirens blared across the Armada. Defensive shields activated, weapons armed, engines roared to life. But no attack came. The objects did not explode. They were not missiles. They were probes. The small machines spread through the formation, scanning every alien ship, sending streams of data back to the human warship. The aliens realized the truth with horror. The humans were studying them, measuring their defenses, counting their weapons. It was like a predator circling its prey, learning every weakness before striking. The admiral's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to scream at his ships to hold fire, but the panic was too strong. Everywhere crews shouted, weapons powered, engines shifted. The formation broke as captains moved out of position, desperate to protect themselves. The unity of the Armada was falling apart. On one cruiser, a gunner begged to open fire on the probes, but the captain refused. On another, the crew fired without orders, destroying a single probe. It did not matter. 10 more probes replaced it instantly. The human ship never reacted. It only watched. That silence, that patience, was worse than any attack. The admiral finally spoke, his voice sharp, filled with fury to hide his fear. He ordered every captain to hold position. He told them that firing again would doom them all. His voice carried across the fleet, but few believed his strength. The probes continued their work, drifting through the Armada like cold eyes. The human ship grew closer, filling the screens of every vessel until it seemed to block out the stars. The admiral stared at the massive hull and felt his courage slip away. His officers turned to him for answers, but he had none. The fear was too deep, too heavy. He wondered why the humans waited. Why had they not destroyed them already? What were they planning? And then it came, the second human transmission. It was a code, short and sharp, but this time the admiral understood at once. The message was simple, terrifying, and final. It said, "We begin." The admiral's blood froze. His crews shouted in panic. Across the fleet, captains screamed orders. Engines flared, weapons charged, shields expanded. The Armada erupted in chaos, every ship preparing for the storm they knew was coming. And in the blackness of space, the human warship opened its weapons for the first time. The coded message echoed across the alien fleet, "We begin." Those 2 words struck harder than any weapon. On the flagship, the admiral felt the blood drain from his face. His crew stared at their screens, terrified of what would come next. No one spoke, no one breathed, every eye locked on the massive human warship that now faced them with open intent. Slowly, sections of the human ship's hull unfolded like the wings of some ancient beast. Panels shifted, heavy armor plates moved aside, and beneath them, lines of weapons revealed themselves. Cannons as tall as towers extended from their bays. Long missile tubes glowed with energy. The sight was overwhelming. The alien fleet had weapons, yes, but their designs looked weak compared to this fortress of war. The human ship did not rush. Each weapon powered up one after the other, in calm sequence, like a predator stretching before the hunt. The silence of space carried no sound, yet every alien crew swore they could feel the low hum of human power vibrating in their bones. Panic spread fast. Captains shouted to their crews, demanding shields at maximum. Engineers pushed their systems to the limit. Pilots gripped their controls, waiting for the first strike. But no strike came. Instead, the human warship released another signal. This time it was a wide transmission, broadcast to every ship in the Armada. The signal was an old code, used long ago in battles none of these aliens had lived to see. Few could understand it, but those who did gasped in horror. The message translated into 3 simple words: "We see you." Again that terrible phrase. It was not a threat of destruction. It was a statement of dominance. The humans were telling them that hiding was useless, that every shield, every trick, every secret was already known. On one destroyer, a young officer dropped to his knees, whispering that they were already dead. His captain shouted at him to rise, but his own voice shook. On another cruiser, a crewman abandoned his post, hiding in the maintenance bay, refusing to face the screens. Fear had already defeated them, even before the first weapon fired. The admiral clenched his fists so tight that his claws dug into his skin. He tried to rally his fleet. He opened a channel to every ship and spoke with all the strength left in him. He told them that they were not cowards, that their weapons were many, that one ship could not defeat them all. His words carried authority, but deep in his heart he knew they were lies. Across the channel he heard silence. No cheers, no courage, only silence. His fleet no longer believed in victory. The human ship finally moved. A single beam of light cut through the void. It was not aimed at a ship but across empty space, passing close enough to one frigate that its hull shuddered from the shockwave. The message was clear. The humans were showing their accuracy, their control. They could kill whenever they chose, but they wanted the aliens to feel the weight of waiting. The frigate's crew screamed in terror, some collapsing at their stations. The captain tried to calm them, but his voice was drowned by the cries of panic. Another beam followed, this time grazing the edge of a destroyer's shields. The shields flared brightly, then went dark, drained of power in an instant. The destroyer floated helpless, its crew begging for orders, but none came. The admiral shouted across the comms, demanding that no one fire, but his command was ignored. On the far side of the fleet, one captain snapped. His fear overwhelmed him. He screamed for his gunners to unleash everything they had. His ship opened fire with a storm of plasma rounds and missiles. The weapons lit up the darkness, streaking toward the human warship in desperate fury. For a moment, other ships followed, firing their weapons too. Beams, torpedoes, and rockets filled the void, converging on the human vessel. It looked like a wall of fire, a desperate attempt to destroy the predator before it struck. But as the weapons struck the human warship, the result was the same as before. The shields absorbed everything. Explosions of light danced across the hull, but when the fire cleared, the warship still stood untouched. Not a single scratch. The alien crews froze in despair. Their strongest combined firepower had meant nothing. The human warship remained silent, almost amused by their desperation. Then it fired for real. A single cannon roared, sending a line of energy across the fleet. The beam struck the ship that had fired first. In an instant, the vessel was gone. There was no explosion, no debris, only dust and silence where the ship had been. The alien fleet fell into chaos. Crews screamed, captains shouted, ships collided as they broke formation. Fear turned into madness. The admiral shouted for discipline, but no one listened. He realized the truth then. The humans did not just destroy bodies. They destroyed hope. And hope was the only weapon the Armada had left. The admiral leaned forward in his chair, his eyes locked on the human warship. He felt the weight of history pressing down on him, the truth of every story he had heard. Humans were not like other races. They were not conquerors for territory or resources. They were something else, something far worse. They were the nightmare that never died. The admiral whispered to himself, barely loud enough for his crew to hear. "We cannot win." The human ship seemed to hear his words, for at that moment, its weapons lit up once more. The alien fleet shook with fear after the destruction of the first ship. A single human cannon had erased it in one breath, leaving nothing but drifting particles. The admiral sat frozen on the flagship, his 4 eyes locked on the terrible sight. Around him, his officers worked frantically at their stations, but none of them spoke of victory anymore. They spoke only of survival. The human warship did not rush. Its weapons glowed faintly, its dark hull calm and unbroken. It seemed almost patient, like a predator circling a herd, waiting for the right moment to strike. The silence was unbearable. The admiral ordered his fleet to regroup, but panic had already spread beyond control. Some ships drifted out of formation, others fired weapons at empty space, mistaking shadows for threats. Fear had become stronger than discipline. On one frigate, the captain whispered to himself that maybe the humans would show mercy. His crew clung to his words, but none believed them. Everyone knew the humans were not known for mercy in war. They were known for ending battles swiftly and completely. Suddenly, the human warship made its first coordinated move. From its sides, dozens of smaller drones shot into space. They spread in perfect lines, surrounding the alien fleet like silent wolves. The drones emitted pulses of energy, scanning every vessel, measuring shields, recording weaknesses. The aliens tried to target them, but the drones moved too fast, vanishing into the dark before weapons could lock. Some captains ordered their crews not to waste fire, but others fired wildly, filling the void with useless blasts. The admiral slammed his fist against the arm of his chair. He shouted for calm, for order, but his voice was drowned out by the noise of desperate captains screaming across the comms. It was no longer a fleet. It was a mob of frightened ships. The human warship fired again, but not to destroy. This time its cannons struck near the edge of the formation, blowing apart empty space. The shockwave slammed into several ships, throwing them off course. It was a warning shot, a reminder that humans could kill them all whenever they wished. The admiral understood the strategy. The humans were not rushing to destroy. They were breaking the Armada from the inside, making them fear their own mistakes. Fear would do more damage than any weapon. On one destroyer, the crew refused to listen to their captain's commands. They screamed at him, demanding to retreat. The captain tried to stay firm, but when he hesitated, his crew acted without him. They turned the ship, ignited their engines, and fled into the black. The admiral saw it on his screen. He cursed in rage, but more ships followed. One by one, smaller vessels began to break away from the formation, their captains unable to control their terrified crews. The Armada, once proud and united, was fracturing. The human warship did not chase the deserters. It simply remained in position, letting the fear spread like a disease. That silence, that patience, was worse than fire. On the flagship, the admiral's second officer leaned close, his voice low and shaking. "We should consider retreat," he said. The admiral's jaws tightened. His pride told him to stand and fight, but his heart whispered that they were already defeated. He stared at the warship, its dark hull glowing with faint lines of energy. He felt like prey staring into the eyes of a predator. He wanted to speak words of courage, but lies would no longer hold his crew together. And then it happened. One alien captain, trembling with fear, ordered his ship to fire again. Plasma cannons lit up, missiles launched, streaking across the void. The admiral shouted for him to stop, but his voice came too late. The weapons struck the human warship's shields and vanished without effect, just like before. The crew of that alien ship froze in despair, certain that death would come. The human warship responded instantly. This time it fired not one cannon, but many. Brilliant beams of energy cut through the void, striking the ship that had attacked. The vessel disintegrated in seconds, its hull melting into nothingness. But the strike did not stop there. Two nearby ships were caught in the blast, their shields collapsing under the shock. One erupted in flames, splitting apart. The other spun helplessly, its engines dead. 3 ships gone in an instant, erased as if they had never existed. The Armada screamed in terror. Captains shouted over each other, crews begged for orders, but chaos ruled. Some ships began firing blindly, launching missiles in every direction. Others fled at full speed, engines burning bright as they abandoned formation. The admiral tried to call them back, but his words fell on deaf ears. No one trusted his command anymore. They trusted only their fear. The human warship remained steady, unmoving, its weapons still glowing with restrained power. It did not need to chase. It knew the Armada was already broken. On one cruiser, a soldier whispered that the humans were playing with them, like hunters playing with prey before the kill. His words spread through the crew, and terror consumed them. On another ship, the captain ordered a full retreat, ignoring the admiral's command. Soon half the fleet was breaking away, running in different directions, scattering like frightened animals. The admiral lowered his head, his body heavy with despair. He had led many wars, conquered many enemies, but he had never seen an enemy win a battle without truly fighting. The humans had fired only a handful of times, and yet the Armada was falling apart. He turned his gaze once more to the massive warship. It did not move to stop the fleeing ships. It did not fire at those who surrendered. It simply waited, watching, letting fear destroy what no weapon could. The admiral whispered to himself, his voice almost broken. They do not need to fight. They let us kill ourselves. At that moment, the human warship powered up another line of weapons. The admiral's crew gasped, their screens glowing with the heat of the cannons. The admiral felt his throat tighten. He knew the first real strike was about to begin, and when it came, the galaxy would never forget it. The human warship floated in silence, but its weapons glowed brighter with every passing second. Across the Armada, alien crews stared at their screens in horror. They had seen what one human cannon could do, and now dozens of cannons burned with light, aimed directly at them. The admiral stood on the flagship's bridge, his claws gripping the arm of his chair so tightly that the metal bent under the pressure. His officers whispered in fear, some begging him to order retreat, others urging him to attack, but he knew neither would save them. The human ship had already chosen its moment. A deep hum rolled through the void. Sensors screamed warnings. Then the counterstrike began. Blinding beams of energy cut across the darkness like lines of fire. They struck with perfect precision, each aimed at a different ship. In the space of a heartbeat, 5 alien vessels were gone. Their shields shattered instantly, their hulls torn apart, their crews erased in silence. The explosions lit the black sky, and the Armada shook with terror. The aliens returned fire in desperation. Hundreds of cannons lit up at once, filling the void with plasma bolts and missiles. The storm of weapons converged on the human warship, a flood of firepower that could level a planet. But when the smoke cleared, the human ship still stood untouched. Its shields absorbed everything, glowing faintly as if mocking their efforts. Not a single scar marked its hull. On one cruiser, the captain collapsed into his chair, his eyes wide with despair. "It cannot be killed," he whispered, and his crew believed him. On another ship, the crew abandoned their posts, running in panic, some even trying to escape in lifeboats. The admiral shouted for order, but no one listened. Fear had already taken every heart. The human warship fired again. This time it unleashed a volley of missiles, each glowing with blue fire. They streaked through the fleet like hunters chasing prey. Alien ships tried to dodge, but the missiles curved and followed, unrelenting. One destroyer was struck, and in an instant it disintegrated into nothing but burning fragments. Another tried to flee, but 3 missiles pierced its engines, tearing it apart. The admiral watched helplessly as his ships vanished one after another. Every strike was clean, precise, merciless. The humans wasted no energy. Each shot was a lesson in fear. The admiral's second officer turned to him, eyes wide, voice trembling. "We must surrender, Admiral. There is no hope." The admiral felt rage burn in his chest, but it was not directed at the officer. It was directed at himself. He had led this fleet with pride, believing it unstoppable, but now he saw the truth. Against humans, numbers meant nothing. Discipline meant nothing. Fear had already won the battle before the first weapon was fired. On the far side of the Armada, another ship tried to run. Its engines roared, pushing it into the dark. For a moment it seemed it might escape. But then a single human beam reached out, touching it gently, and the ship vanished in a burst of light. There was no escape. The message was clear. Across the fleet, more ships broke formation. Some fled blindly into the void, others turned their weapons on the probes still circling them, desperate to hit something, anything. The chaos only grew. The human warship did not chase them. It did not need to. Every action was planned, every strike controlled. The aliens felt like toys in the hands of a master. The admiral finally slumped back into his chair. His voice was hollow when he spoke. "This is not war," he said softly. "This is judgment." His officers said nothing. They only stared at the screens, watching their proud Armada collapse. The human ship fired another wave. This time it targeted the communications relays of 3 vessels. In an instant, their channels went dark, cutting them off from the rest of the fleet. The crews screamed in panic, convinced they were next. The admiral understood the strategy. The humans were not just destroying ships. They were destroying hope, breaking the fleet piece by piece until nothing remained but fear. And it was working. On one battleship, the captain turned to his crew with trembling hands. He whispered that they should lower their weapons, shut down their systems, maybe the humans would spare them. His crew obeyed instantly, their ship falling silent in the dark. The admiral saw it and felt a twist of shame in his heart. His fleet was surrendering without even being asked. But before he could speak, the human warship did something unexpected. It ceased fire. The glowing cannons dimmed, the missiles stopped, the probes returned to their bays. The massive vessel drifted silently once more. The sudden stillness was more terrifying than the attack. The aliens expected destruction, but instead the humans had paused, as if waiting. The admiral felt his chest grow heavy. He realized the humans were letting them think. Letting them feel the full weight of fear. They were showing that they could end this battle whenever they wished, but they were choosing not to, because control was already theirs. The alien crews whispered to each other in dread. Why had the humans stopped? What did it mean? On the flagship, the admiral leaned forward, his voice shaking. "They are not finished," he said. "This is only the beginning." And as if in answer, the human warship sent a single new transmission. It was 2 words, sharp and final. "Leave. Now." The message struck the fleet like a hammer. "Leave. Now." Only 2 words, but every alien heart felt the weight of them. It was not a plea, not even a threat. It was a command. The humans were not offering negotiation. They were ordering the Armada to run. On the flagship, the admiral sat frozen in silence. His 4 eyes stared at the transmission screen, his claws gripping the arms of his chair. He wanted to deny it, wanted to shout that his fleet would never bow to humans, but when he opened his mouth no words came. Around him, his officers whispered in fear. Some repeated the words to themselves, as if they could not believe them. Others looked at the admiral with pleading eyes, waiting for him to say what they all wanted to hear, that they were allowed to escape. The admiral's throat tightened. His pride screamed against surrender, but his mind knew the truth. This was not a battle. It was a slaughter held back only by human patience. Already dozens of ships were gone, erased in moments. And the human warship had only shown a fraction of its power. Across the Armada, the command channels exploded with noise. Captains shouted over one another, their voices filled with panic and desperation. Some cried that they must retreat before the humans struck again. Others warned that if they ran, the humans would chase and destroy them anyway. A few, their pride still strong, insisted they should fight to the last ship. The admiral tried to cut through the chaos. He ordered silence. He demanded discipline. But his voice, once respected, now sounded weak. His fleet no longer believed in him. On one cruiser, the captain gave the order to power down weapons and prepare for retreat. His crew obeyed instantly, relief on their faces. On another ship, the crew refused their captain's commands, screaming that they would not die for honor. They turned the vessel without permission, engines burning bright as they fled into the black. The admiral saw it all on his tactical display. His fleet was breaking apart before his eyes. He had lost command. He slammed his fist against his chair and roared at his captains to return to formation, but no one listened. Ships scattered like frightened birds, some firing wildly in panic, others cutting engines in surrender, hoping the humans would spare them. The human warship did not move. It remained in place, silent, watching as the Armada dissolved. That silence was the cruelest weapon of all. The admiral's second officer leaned close, his voice low and trembling. "We should obey them," he whispered. "If we leave now, perhaps they will not destroy us." The admiral turned to him, rage in his eyes, but the fire faded quickly. Deep down he knew the officer was right. But to obey meant admitting that the Armada, the pride of their empire, had been defeated without a true fight. His heart broke at the thought. On a nearby destroyer, a group of soldiers mutinied against their captain. They forced him from his chair and seized control, shouting that they would flee at once. The ship turned sharply and sped away, leaving the rest behind. Similar chaos erupted across the fleet. Discipline was gone. Authority was gone. All that remained was fear. The admiral lowered his head, his mind filled with despair. He remembered the stories told long ago, stories he once dismissed as exaggeration. Stories of humans who could turn entire wars with only a handful of ships. Stories of enemies collapsing before the first true strike. Now he understood that those stories had not been lies. They had been warnings. He looked once more at the massive human warship. Its weapons were quiet now, but he knew it was only waiting. Waiting to see if the aliens obeyed. Waiting to decide their fate. He opened a channel to all remaining ships. His voice was tired, broken, but clear. "Hold your positions," he said. "Do not fire again. Do not act in panic. If we are to survive this, we must not give them a reason to finish us." But even as he spoke, he could hear the desperation in the responses. Many captains no longer answered him. Others sent messages filled with panic, begging for guidance, begging for permission to run. He gave no answer, because he had none. On one battleship, the crew powered down everything, engines, weapons, shields, leaving themselves naked in space. They believed surrender was the only hope. On another, the captain screamed that surrender was death and ordered his gunners to prepare for a final stand. His crew obeyed with trembling hands, knowing it would be their end. The admiral felt torn apart. His fleet was no longer an armada. It was a collection of broken ships, each making its own choice in fear. He had lost command. He had lost control. He had lost everything. His officers turned to him, waiting for his final decision. Should they retreat? Should they surrender? Should they fight? The admiral stared at the human warship. It floated there like a dark god, unmoving, unshaken. It had not pursued the fleeing ships. It had not destroyed the ones that surrendered. It only watched, certain of its power. He realized then that the humans were not just fighting a battle. They were sending a message. A message that would spread across the stars. No fleet, no empire, no power could stand against them. He whispered the truth at last, his voice almost too soft to hear. The battle is over. The Armada is finished. And in the silence that followed, the human warship's weapons lit up again, casting light across the broken fleet. The weapons of the human warship glowed like stars in the dark. Every alien eye locked onto the sight, hearts frozen with terror. Some captains screamed for retreat, others whispered prayers, and many sat in silence, waiting for the end. But the end did not come. The cannons hummed, power gathering, yet they did not fire. Instead, a single signal flashed across the fleet's channels. It was not static, not encrypted code, but a voice. A human voice. deep, steady, and filled with authority. "We are not here to slaughter you," it said. "We are here to remind you." The words echoed through every ship, through every bridge and control room. Crews stared at their screens, some trembling, some confused. The admiral on the flagship leaned forward, his eyes wide. He had expected threats, perhaps demands, but not this. The voice continued. "You forget too easily. You think of humans as prey, as a species to conquer, but history is written in your fear of us. You forget the worlds burned when you challenged us. You forget the fleets shattered when you tested us. We remind you now. This is mercy." The word struck like a blade. Mercy. The alien crews looked at each other in disbelief. Mercy. After so many ships destroyed, after so much fear, how could the humans call this mercy? Yet deep down, many knew it was true. If the human warship had chosen, the Armada would already be dust. The admiral felt his chest tighten. He wanted to shout back, to deny the human claim, but his throat locked. His officers stared at him, waiting for his reaction, but he had none. The human voice grew colder. "Leave this sector. Do not return. If your empire sends another armada, we will not warn you again." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. The aliens felt as if the void itself was pressing against them. Some ships immediately cut engines and turned, eager to flee. Others hesitated, unsure if the humans would strike as soon as they moved. On one cruiser, a young officer whispered, "They are letting us live." His captain shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "They are letting us carry the story." The admiral realized the truth of those words. The humans did not want to destroy the fleet. They wanted survivors. Witnesses. Messengers. The Empire would learn what had happened here, and fear would spread faster than any fire. The admiral closed his eyes. He knew he should give the order to retreat, but his pride held him still. He had led this armada with confidence, certain of victory, and now he sat broken, forced to obey the very enemy he had come to destroy. His second officer leaned close, voice low but firm. "Admiral, we must go. If we remain, they will finish us." The admiral opened his eyes, staring at the glowing cannons of the human ship. They had already proved their power. Staying meant death. Slowly, painfully, he nodded. He opened the command channel to what remained of his fleet. His voice shook, but he forced strength into it. "All ships," he said, "prepare to withdraw. Do not fire. Do not resist. Follow my command." Across the fleet, relief washed over crews like a wave. Engines came alive, formations shifted, and the broken armada began to turn. Yet even as they moved, fear gnawed at every heart. What if the humans changed their mind? What if this was a trap, and the moment they turned, the cannons would strike? The admiral felt the same fear, but he gave no sign. He kept his voice calm, ordering the ships to hold their course, to remain steady. The human warship did not move. Its weapons still glowed, but it did not fire. It only watched. One by one, the alien vessels slipped into the dark, engines burning as they fled the cursed sector. On some ships, crews wept with relief. On others, silence reigned, the silence of shame. They had come as conquerors, and they left as survivors. On the flagship, the admiral sat in silence long after his ship had turned. He could not bear to look at his officers. Their eyes carried questions he could not answer. He could only see the human warship on his screen, growing smaller as the distance widened, yet still holding all the power. At last, the human voice returned, calm and final. "Remember this day. Tell your leaders. Tell your people. The humans are watching." Then the signal ended, and the human warship dimmed its weapons, fading into the void like a shadow. The admiral let out a slow breath he had not realized he was holding. His chest ached with the weight of failure, but more than failure, he felt the weight of fear. He knew this day would never be forgotten. Not by him, not by his officers, not by anyone who survived. It would become legend. And legends had power. As the Armada limped away, broken and silent, the Admiral whispered to himself, words he hoped no one else would hear. "We were not defeated in battle," he said softly. "We were judged." The Armada limped through the void, broken and silent. Engines burned weakly, hulls scarred, formations scattered. Once, this fleet had launched with pride, banners raised high, the glory of the Empire shining upon them. Now they crawled home like beaten animals, carrying nothing but fear. On the flagship, the Admiral sat in his chair, staring at the dark screen where the human warship had last been seen. He could not erase the image from his mind, the glowing weapons that never fired, the voice that spoke with absolute control. His officers worked in silence, avoiding his gaze. None dared to speak of what had happened. Yet the silence was heavy with unspoken truth. They all knew the Empire would demand answers. On a smaller cruiser, a young lieutenant whispered to his captain, "What do we tell them?" The captain's face was pale, his voice hollow. "The truth," he said. "There is no other story to tell. They will know if we lie. They will see the fear in us." Similar whispers passed across the fleet. Some feared the punishment of their own rulers more than the humans. Some even suggested erasing the records, claiming a natural disaster had destroyed their ships. But deep down, everyone understood the same thing: the humans wanted this story told. And no one dared disobey. Days stretched into weeks as the Armada crawled back toward their territory. Supplies ran low, tempers frayed, and many ships argued among themselves. Crews blamed their leaders, captains blamed the Admiral, and the Admiral blamed himself. Yet no one could escape the truth: they had been spared, not because of mercy, but because of a message. Finally, the homeworld appeared on their screens, a shining sphere wrapped in defense grids and orbital stations. Normally, such a sight filled returning fleets with pride. This time, it filled them with shame. The Admiral stood on the bridge, his uniform torn, his voice heavy. "Prepare to dock," he ordered. His officers obeyed, though their eyes never met his. As the flagship entered the atmosphere, reports had already reached the Empire's High Council. Word spread quickly. An Armada had returned. But the signals spoke of heavy losses, of scattered formations, of survivors trembling. Whispers filled the capital before the fleet had even landed. The once proud citizens gathered at the ports to see their warriors return. They expected triumph. What they saw was ruin. Hulls scarred, ships limping, banners torn away. The crowds gasped in horror. This was not victory. This was humiliation. The Admiral walked down the ramp of his flagship, his steps slow, his head heavy. The High Council waited in the Grand Hall, their robes flowing, their faces cold. The leader of the council, an elder with eyes sharp as blades, stepped forward. "Admiral," he said, his voice echoing, "you left with the greatest fleet our empire has ever assembled. You return with wreckage. Explain." The Admiral lowered his gaze. He wanted to speak proudly, to claim that they had fought bravely, that the enemy had been too many. But lies would not survive. The records were clear. The survivors would speak. He drew in a breath and forced out the words. "We faced a human warship." A ripple of shock spread through the hall. Counselors whispered fiercely among themselves. The elder raised a hand for silence. "One ship?" he asked. "You claim one ship broke an armada?" The Admiral nodded slowly. "Not just broke us," he said. "It commanded us. It spared us. And it sent us back to deliver its warning." He repeated the human message, each word tasting like poison. The counselors listened in disbelief, their faces pale with unease. Some shouted that it was impossible, that no single vessel could hold such power. Others muttered that the humans were not to be underestimated. The elder remained silent, studying the Admiral with cold eyes. "You expect us to believe," he said at last, "that the humans defeated you without battle? That they let you live as messengers?" The Admiral raised his head, his voice trembling but firm. "Not only believe. You must understand. They did not let us live out of kindness. They let us live so the Empire would know fear. His words struck the hall like thunder. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was filled only with the sound of the Admiral's ragged breathing. Then one of the counselors rose, his voice sharp with anger. "Cowardice," he hissed. "You lost your will. You dishonor the Empire with your weakness. Humans are flesh and blood, nothing more. If one ship could shatter you, it was because you lacked strength." Several others nodded in agreement, their pride refusing to accept the truth. But others shook their heads, their faces grim. "We have heard these stories before," one elder whispered. "Ancient wars, ancient defeats. Always the humans. Always the same ending." Perhaps the stories were not myths after all. The chamber erupted in argument, voices clashing, pride against fear. The Admiral stood in silence, knowing his words had planted the seed. The Empire might deny it, might rage against it, but deep inside they would never forget. The humans had marked them. Outside the hall, the citizens gathered in fear. Rumors spread like fire, of human ships that could erase fleets, of human voices that commanded obedience. The story grew with every telling, each survivor adding details, each listener trembling more. The Admiral returned to his quarters alone. He sat in the darkness, staring at the stars beyond the window. He knew the Empire would not stay silent. They would send another fleet one day. They would test the humans again. But he also knew the ending. The humans would not warn them twice. And when that day came, the Empire itself would tremble. The council chamber was heavy with anger and fear. Weeks had passed since the broken Armada had returned, but the memory of their humiliation still burned in every corner of the Empire. Some counselors called for revenge, demanding that the humans be crushed, no matter the cost. Others urged caution, their voices low, warning that the humans had let them live for a reason. The debate grew louder with every meeting, splitting the Empire into factions. The Admiral who had returned in shame sat quietly in the chamber, summoned each day to repeat his testimony. Each time he spoke the same words. "They spared us to remind us. If we fight again, there will be no survivors." Many ignored him, calling him a coward. Yet even those who mocked him could not erase the fear in their eyes. Outside, the people whispered stories in the streets. Some said the humans had ships the size of moons. Others claimed they commanded weapons that could erase entire stars. The truth did not matter anymore. Fear had grown larger than fact. Still, pride is a powerful poison. The Empire could not bear the thought of bowing to a species they had once considered prey. At last, the Council voted. Another fleet would be built. Stronger, larger, armed with weapons untested and dangerous. The Empire would prove itself or burn in the attempt. The Admiral begged them to reconsider. "You do not understand," he said, his voice breaking. "One ship was enough to break us. If they send more, we will not survive." But his words were drowned by the roar of the Council. The Empire would not retreat into fear. It would march into war. Months passed as the fleet was built. Vast shipyards burned with light, forges thundered, engineers worked without rest. Soon the largest armada in the history of the Empire stood ready, rows upon rows of warships gleaming like knives in the dark. Pride returned to the people, but under that pride lay unease. Even the captains, chosen for their loyalty, could not forget the stories of the first defeat. And the Admiral, stripped of command, stood in silence as he watched them prepare for doom. Then the fleet launched. Thousands of ships left the homeworld, engines blazing, banners raised high. The people cheered as they vanished into the stars, but their cheers were thin, hollow, and filled with doubt. 4 days the fleet traveled, crossing into human space. Scanners spread wide, searching, waiting. Every crew member held their breath, remembering what had happened the last time. Then, on the 7th day, the sensors caught something. A signal. A single contact. It was not thousands of ships. It was not even dozens. It was one human warship. The fleet froze. On every bridge, officers stared in disbelief. How could it be the same again? Had the humans sent only one ship to meet them? The admirals of the new fleet laughed coldly. "This is their mistake," one declared. "We are ready this time. We will not be cowed by shadows." Orders spread, weapons charged, ships moved into formation. The human warship drifted in silence, alone, as if daring them to strike. For a moment, it seemed the Empire's pride would finally break their fear. But then the human ship moved. Not forward. Not into battle. It simply sent out a signal. And the signal was not one voice this time. It was many. Across the void, new signatures appeared. Not one ship. Not a dozen. Hundreds. Thousands. A storm of human warships lit up the scanners, surrounding the Empire's fleet from every side. The void itself seemed to bend under their presence. The alien crews froze in terror, their pride shattering in an instant. They had thought the humans sent one ship as a test. They had been wrong. That first ship had been a messenger. This was the truth. The lead human voice cut through the silence, calm and merciless. "This is your last warning. Leave our borders. Do not return. If you fire even once, your empire will cease to exist." The alien admirals trembled, their pride broken, their voices weak. Some screamed for retreat. Others stood frozen, unable to speak. And on many bridges, crews wept openly. They knew they had marched into death. The humans had been patient. They had given mercy once. Now, the void itself seemed to whisper the end. The admirals gathered on a private channel, their voices desperate. "We cannot win," one said. "If we fire, we die. If we retreat, we live in shame." Silence followed, heavy and final. The choice was clear. Pride had brought them here, but pride would not save them. Slowly, painfully, the order was given. Retreat. Across the fleet, engines flared, ships turned, and the greatest armada of the Empire began to flee without firing a single shot. The humans did not move to stop them. Their ships remained silent, watching, countless weapons glowing but still. They did not need to strike. The fear was already complete. As the Empire's fleet vanished back into the dark, the human voice spoke once more, soft but cutting like steel. "We warned you. This is your last chance. If your kind enters our space again, there will be no mercy." Then the voices ended, and the human armada vanished, leaving only silence. The Empire's fleet limped home, broken not in battle but in spirit. And when they returned, their story spread across every world. The humans were no myth. They were power. They were judgment. The admiral who had once warned the council stood at his window, watching the stars. He knew what would happen now. The Empire would never forget this day. It would be carved into their history, etched into their blood. And somewhere in the dark, the humans would be watching, waiting, ready to end them if they ever forgot again. For the Empire, there would be no third chance.